Hello, welcome back to Ycft. It has been 20 years this year since Wrong Turn came out. I always thought it was The Wrong Turn, I think, when I was younger, but just Wrong Turn.
Wrong Turn
Came out, which is kind of baffling to me. So
kind of scary.
It is kind of scary, but it's also one of those movies. Like, I was like 10 years old when this came out. I was far too young to watch it.
Oh, I'm exactly the same. Like this movie, it's not like I'm sentimental towards it, but it's definitely one of those first films I remember.
It had a reputation.
I was aware of it. Yeah, like 2003 was the year that I was like discovering horror on my own, and I vividly remember like seeing trailers for it. It was a big film when it came out, and I remember my mum specifically was like, "This is one that's not for you. You are not watching this."
So, the brief synopsis of this film. Group of characters, they leave the highway because there's been some sort of like crash and there's backup traffic for ages. We're following a guy called Chris, played by
Desmond Harrington.
Who you know him from Ghost Ship.
I do.
I'm just going to say,
I do.
I love him in this, but his facial expressions do not change through the entire film.
I fucking love Desmond Harrington.
So he takes this dirt road to try and essentially get around the traffic, ends up crashing his car into some other people whose car has been sabotaged by some like barbed wire, who's led by Eliza Dushku.
Eliza Dushku, yeah. Faith from Buffy.
Yeah.
The other Slayer.
It's like her big break after Buffy.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get hunted down by inbred cannibal mountain men.
Obviously.
That is the basic synopsis of this film.
Yeah.
It's not that much more complicated than that.
It's really not.
I remember, like, weirdly, just thinking about the legacy of this film, being warned off it, because I remember, like, there being, like, articles on everything. It's like, oh, it's so violent. Like, it's disgusting. And I know when this film was getting marketed, it struggled to get a rating for adverts, which is why a lot of all the sequels, up until the most recent remake, which the remake was actually written by the original writer.
Yes,
and we actually really enjoyed the remake. That's worth a video for another day.
Yeah.
But there's 7 films in total, include 2 remakes. Wrong Turn 6, which is actually called Wrong Turn 6, is also a reboot.
Strange.
But they all went direct to DVD, because I think you might have the limitations of budget, but a bit more freedom.
Yeah, sure.
But this film, it has a reputation for being incredibly violent. It's actually not as violent as you'd think, based on it's violent, but kind of violent in the same way. I'm going to link it a bit to Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Uh-huh.
Because it's very much like the original one in that that has a reputation for being an extremely violent and bloody film. This is a bloody film, but not nearly as violent as it's remembered.
It's misremembered, I think.
I think it is
a
lot of the sequels do lean into the very schlocky,
the gore,
ultra-violent, elaborate kills. They are what this film is remembered for.
Yeah.
Also, this film came out a couple of months before the reboot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Mm-hmm. As well as you're dressed like this because Eliza Dushku's character is dressed almost exactly the same as Jessica Biel's character in that film. That's just how we're dressed in 2003, apparently.
This is the closest I will ever come to looking like Eliza Dushku.
Or Jessica Biel.
Or Jessica Biel. So yes, I appreciate this very limited cosplay.
Yeah, but I find it really amusing that they're both dressed the same way. But this film basically walked so that one could run because Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 is about as violent as people remember this film being, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I think that's a fair enough point to make.
Yeah, totally. And I was one of those people as well. Like, as I say, I have childhood memories of Wrong Turn coming out, and I think it's a mix of like seeing the TV spots for it, seeing the trailers, a mix of my mum being like, no, you can't watch it. It just kind of played in my head of, oh, Wrong Turn is like really bad, like Wrong Turn's really gruesome. And I watched it like probably in the mid-2000s is when I finally did see it. I definitely didn't see it in 2003. And I remember being a bit scared by it because, again, I was still a kid. But rewatching it, it's definitely not as gory as I remember it being.
This was one of those films I watched in my night porter job when I discovered Friday the 13th and all that. So it would have been maybe like 2010 I might have watched this.
Oh, really?
Maybe.
Oh, okay.
So it was quite late on that I watched it.
Yeah.
But weirdly, like, you discovered a kind of a bit of a link with the X-Files with this episode. Because there's an episode which I've very recently watched. Obviously, you can also like compare it a lot to The Hills Have Eyes.
I think there's a few.
I've seen the comparison. It's Hills Have Eyes crossed with Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Hillbilly Horror, I guess, is kind of like in and of itself its own subgenre now. But yeah, just for wider context, bit of a tangent. I am a huge X-Files fan, and since we've been together, I've been trying to get you into the
I'm
X-Files.
4 seasons in.
Yes, we started 3 years ago, but still, it's progress. We're now on season 4, and I'd forgotten that Home, which is the episode I just want to talk about briefly, is very early on in season 4, but Home is particularly notorious in X-Files lore because it was banned off the original network. It was aired once, and so many people complained about it, and it was taken off the air for like 10 years. I think the next time it was shown was when it was like moved to a different channel. But that whole subplot of Home, the episode, is to do with hillbillies. I don't think they're necessarily cannibals. But
No, they are inbred though.
It is an inbred family. There are 3 boys, the Peacocks, and they live with their mum. And the whole story kind of kickstarts where a baby, the body of a newborn baby is discovered who's just, horribly inbred and just like every kind of disease wrong with it. I think is what Scully says. Like technically the child should not. It's just impossible that this baby was even born, and that's what gets Scully and Mulder involved. But yes, it deals with these 3 boys living with their mum and having a very incestuous relationship, and they rig their house with booby traps. There's a particularly horrible death where the sheriff and his wife are brutally murdered. And yeah, it was inundated with complaints. People really didn't like it, and it's one of the better episodes I think of.
Yeah, it was. I say enjoyment is not the word.
No, but it's well done.
It's very well done.
It's very well
You're
done.
saying weirdly, it resurfaced when they started playing reruns of the X-Files in the UK. So we showed that episode, and we were the people who banned films during the Video Nasties era.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
allowed that episode.
And
now it's on Disney Plus,
Yeah.
which is
I think
baffling to me.
there is something to be said that, like, when you talk about hillbilly horror, whether that's inbreeding or cannibalism or whatever it is, it is one of those particular subgenres that just seems to kind of touch a nerve with people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we've got torture porn, which is I guess
Which would have came out around the same
around the same time.
as this.
It's not for everyone, but hillbilly horror, it's always sort of been there. And it's always consistently been one of the more controversial subgenres. Whatever it is, we just don't seem to like them, or we can't take them. Texas Chainsaw Massacre comes under that. I mean, Deliverance, which arguably isn't really a horror, it's more of just a thriller drama.
Well, this has been weirdly compared
Infamous.
to Deliverance quite a bit as well.
Yeah, it's mountain men, guys.
Yeah, I think the main difference that this has over the likes of Hills of Eyes is that the female characters are never under any sexual threat in this. They are purely going to be eaten. Which I think when you watch a hillbilly horror, you often, especially when there's inbreeding, you often worry that you're going to be made to watch a scene. Hills of Eyes 2 especially is a very
Nasty.
hard film to watch.
Yeah, it is. It's not.
And
I
I was
never watch it
grateful
again.
not to have to deal with that with this film. The film actually, for the most part, takes itself pretty seriously. I'm going to say the cinematography is really nice. Great use of great practical effects.
Well,
But the visual effects in this, there's scenes when they're up in the trees where they do a digital camera movement to go down through these, by today you can tell, digital branches down to the hillbillies at the bottom. Or there's a shot when they're all hiding from them in their hut. Where it goes up to the keyhole and they've composited her eye, which then has a reflection of a knife coming down into a body. It's way more thought went into this
yeah,
than probably what was needed, but it shows
shows care.
it shows care, attention to detail. Stan Winston produced this, didn't
I was
he?
going to say, do you remember who the producer is? Yeah, he also obviously designed the Mountain Men effects as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very well constructed film.
It is.
And so the Mountain Men, so they have, this baffled me. I always knew they had names, but I didn't realize they had real names. So there's One Eye, Sawtooth, and Three Finger. But that's the nicknames they were given. But what are their actual names? I don't know what.
One Eye is called Tudor.
And he's the tallest one, isn't he?
Yeah, he's also the one with one eye.
Yeah.
Sawtooth is Andu, and Three Finger is Adre or Andre. Andre, maybe. Yeah.
So I never knew until researching this video
They
that they had
actually
real
have
names.
birth names. Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea. They were just given names based off how they look.
Yeah.
And Three Finger, especially, he's played by what's his?
A fabulous actor called Julian Richings.
it'll almost be impossible for you to have seen something without him in. He's got like well of like 200 film credits.
Yeah.
But he's always like in like little bit parts. Like you wouldn't recognize him. I know him from Supernatural. He plays Death.
Yeah.
And
that tracks.
Wonderfully plays the role. And he is great. I think it's the only time he played Freefinger, because Freefinger is one of the
He's
the recurring characters, and he's played so brilliantly. His laugh became iconic.
That like high pitched shrilly laugh as he's throwing his axe and just chasing after them through the forest. Like it's I love the effects of them are great, and Freefinger is like my personal favorite of the Hillbilly Bro.
I haven't seen the meme. There's a great meme where everyone's like, there's a couple like line attempts like, sometimes I just want this, and then I think of this, and you see Freefinger stood off in the forest. Like, sometimes when you go camping, you do often think, what if?
Just what if? But I do think a strength of the movie is that the brothers, because I assume they are brothers, like they are related. An
issue I kind of have, the opening credits kind of give you homework to do, because there's a lot of like newspaper articles and stuff on like inbreeding and stuff like that, because there's not a lot, you don't find out a ton about them through the film. So the opening credits are the homework that you need to do. If you don't really need to dive,
but it's like it's there for you to digest. Yeah. If you're willing to look into it. They are obviously they're a presence in the movie, but they're not like the starring parts of the movie.
Yeah,
like
they're actually hidden for a lot of it. I think that's a way to try and make them look more creepy.
We get glimpses of them, but we basically kind of, whenever we see them from our main character's point of view. So we kind of see them as like from a distance sometimes, or like through a keyhole, or things like that. So they're there, but they're also just kind of just out of complete eye shot, which I really, really appreciate.
Yeah,
the way they are portrayed is they're hunters. Like they deliberately sabotage campers in the woods. Like that, of course they're cannibals. Like these people are their food.
I love the shot of like the meadow that's just full of like all the
old cars, and don't you see like children's toys as well, which is really ominous. So it's like they've got this down to a T.
Body parts in jars in the fridge.
Yeah, it's like they've got like a whole little like dining operation going on here.
Oh,
free food.
Yes, obviously when we go on to like the sequels, which I personally think Wrong Turn 2 is the best.
Yeah.
Out of the ones I've seen, I think I watched most of them I've definitely seen most of them, maybe not all of them, because Wrong Turn 3 is awful. You're not a big fan of like the downgraded look of Freefinger, but I would say when people think of that character, that would be the look. Because it's.
I think you're right.
That's the direct-to-DVD cinematography. It's a more plainer look. You see them in broad daylight a lot more.
Yeah, I think.
So that's probably like the look that people most remember. But he does look better.
He looks so
in
much
the original
better.
One.
When I think of Freefinger, I think of the Julian Richings makeup as well. And I've seen behind the scenes of the movie at some point in my life, and I will always remember, because Julian Richings is a very British actor, and he's there's a great snippet of where they're just like casually behind the scenes, and he walks up to the camera and he's just very polite, like, oh, good evening. Like in full hillbilly regalia and everything. It's just the most like British polite man.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Do you think the film holds up? Like,
I absolutely think it holds up. I really enjoyed watching it.
The bits that make you kind of want to go, ugh, still do. When they are in their shack, hiding under like the tension.
Yeah, it is.
The second, I can't remember not the lead, but the other female character.
Carly,
she's so fucking annoying.
Okay.
She's from when things get off, she's just perpetually having a breakdown.
All right. I think we should, because we don't have a lot of them, but I think it might help if we just chat briefly through the main characters. So yeah.
There's the two that are important, and then there's the cannon fodder.
Yeah.
That's the characters.
So, I mean, for most of the group, 2 are killed off very quickly at the beginning of the movie. So we're left with Chris, Carly, Scott, and Jesse.
Scott, I don't mind, actually.
Chris is Desmond Harrington. He's kind of like our main guy.
Stern face.
Very stern face. Jesse is Eliza Dushku. We also have Carly, who is either engaged to Scott or she's going to be engaged to Scott. And, like in most slashers, we have the polar opposites of the female characters. So whereas Jesse is quite kind of, introverted and resourceful and, like kind of, like, right, we just need to do whatever we can to survive kind of mentality. Carly is the one that falls apart and is basically the drip.
Yeah.
She can't cope with anything that's happening around her, and it does get a little bit annoying after a while. Like, she's just incessantly crying, breaking down. There are moments where they're mid-escape and they have to pause to just try and, like, you know, get Carly back.
She is part of, like I said, that shot where it's looking through the keyhole and you see her eye and the digitally added, like, the reflection of, like, a knife coming down into what is her friend's body. It's like one of the best shots.
It's really good.
It's so well done.
It's really well done. Yeah,
that whole sequence.
Oh, it's great. Like,
it's terrifying.
Tension. Yeah, like they have to hide. Two of them are in like a separate room. Two of them are like under this little bed, and they're watching these mountain men just desecrate their friend's corpse, and they have to remain quiet. And then when
they wait there for hours.
Hours, yeah, literally. It's like, probably the next day, maybe, before they actually think to leave, and then Desmond Harrington's like desperately trying to hold the door open for them, almost slicing his fingers off.
It's because there's like a spring on it.
Yeah, and he's got to hold it in place to stop it from squeaking.
We looked back and you see one eye.
Yeah.
You just look back and his eye's just open.
It's one eye.
It's actually a really good jump scare, because at first you kind of like don't realize what you're looking at. You see his eye and you're like, oh shit, it holds on it just long enough for you to notice that he's awake.
He's awake. He's watching.
And then obviously a chase ensues. It's like I said, for the reputation it has, it's actually quite. Apart from, like, I'd say that scene there, it's actually quite an easy film to watch.
It is. It is a very easy film. It's quite a short film, too. It's, like, less than an hour and a half.
It's the perfect length film for the plot.
For what it is. There's the scene where they escape in the trees. You know,
I really like that.
I think that's done really well. Get a decent Carly kill, too, thankfully.
Yeah. There's a couple because I know there's a couple of moments from the second one that they mirror here, because it's like the use of like a Mustang. Obviously, Chris is driving a Mustang. Yeah. They mirror that in the original one. I think the axe thrown into a tree is something that was used in multiple of the other films. I just find it fascinating. Like I said, we were considering doing a versus with the most recent film, but the most recent film is so different.
It is, yeah.
I think it actually warrants a film on its own, and I do actually really enjoy that one.
It's good. It's a good movie.
And that was the most. We can say it was a theatrical release, was it? Even though it barely had a theatrical release because of COVID.
Yeah.
But we can say that was the next theatrical release after the first one.
Yeah.
And I think a movie like Wrong Turn it'd have an easier time in the theatres today than it would back in 2003.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with that as well.
And it still is always on Netflix.
Yeah,
it's constantly popping up on Netflix.
It is. I mean, it's it belongs to the hillbilly horror sort of canon. But yeah, it's not as gory as you probably would assume it is, and I think for the most part it is well acted. Like we have minimal characters here, so like when they do inevitably start, you know, being picked off one by one, it's like, well, you kind of feel the stakes getting higher. I like the decisions that the characters make for the most part too. I know, like you're saying, like Desmond Harrington doesn't really show a lot of expression, but
I do still like him in the role.
I do too. And like, considering he is our final boy, because we get final boy and final girl in this, he has a chance to escape when Eliza Dushku is taken. He gets a chance to escape, and he doesn't. He chooses to go back. You know, so it's like little moments like that. And you know, the boys earlier on in the film, him and Scott decide to, you know, like they act as bait, so the girls have a chance to escape. So it's.
Oh, you know, Scott's death.
Scott, so
close. It's pretty so heartbreaking.
Close. It actually is. Like, you got to allow Carly her little breakdown for that one.
Yeah.
Like, he is basically her fiance.
There's something about the sound effect of an arrow.
Isn't there just?
Yeah.
Yeah. It always gets me.
It always does. So, do you have any more notes on this one?
Just briefly, not so much about the film. I just wanted to talk a little bit about West Virginia.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Because this film is set somewhere in like the deep forest of West Virginia, which I think unfortunately, largely in part to this movie, garnered a particularly like nasty reputation for West Virginia. It didn't necessarily help improve its image in the public like consciousness, I guess. So just for like a little bit of context, in like a little bit of a history lesson. 19th century transportation networks, they start developing very slowly, especially in West Virginia. So the area was never totally cut off from the outside world, but it did have like quite closed communities. And this is just historical fact. There was a lot of poverty, and that kind of helped to grow its reputation as like a bit of a backwater town. And in America, incest kind of became an easy explanation to explain like the bad conditions that this particular area had. And fast forward to 2003 when Wrong Turn is released, it just sort of helped perpetuate this myth that West Virginia and that area is kind of synonymous with inbreeding cannibals. And then in 2004, Abercrombie and Fitch released a t-shirt that's from the movie with the slogan, "It's all relative in West Virginia." And it has a map of the Appalachian state as well, which West Virginians were not very happy with. But I just wanted to include it because I do think that West Virginia does have a bit of a bad reputation, and it is kind of synonymous with, like, I don't know, a particular inbred cannibal, maybe.
So they probably weren't a big fan of this film either.
I don't think they were a fan of the film, but yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't help that they actually filmed it there as well.
Yeah. I should also say that incest and inbreeding is totally forbidden in West Virginia. Yes. I don't even think it's like you're allowed to marry your first cousin or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like it's totally like off the cards.
So, interesting, just thinking going on to the sequel, there's obviously Chris comes across a petrol station with like a creepy guy that kind of points him off in that direction, kind of.
Yeah.
He actually returns in the second one.
He does. I'd forgotten.
I'd completely forgotten.
It's been a while since I've seen the sequel.
Yeah. Henry Rollins in that film is just everything you want.
Yeah.
Leaning more into like the schlockiness. But this, while it's on Netflix for the like 10th time in the past past year probably, it's all, like I said, it's always on there. Just give it a watch, honestly.
Yeah, give it a watch. It is. It's a fun. It's a fun movie. It's actually like pretty well constructed as well.
Yeah.
Whereas the sequels kind of turn the franchise into more of like a schlocky, gruesome kind of mess. Like you said, the first one kind of takes itself a bit more seriously, and it's more tension.
I'm not saying there is still fun to be had in the sequels.
Oh yeah, for sure, but different tones.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously the cannibals take more of like a front seat, I guess.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, it's more about it's a survival. Yeah.
Yeah. Has anyone here seen Wrong Turn or remember it has us bringing it up just reignited a memories? Oh shit, this film exists.
That is 20 years old.
Yeah, which is
fucking hell.
It just still baffles me that like it basically walked so Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 could run.
Yeah.
Like it like got everyone ready for something a bit more violent.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the 2000s really did kick off like ultra violent slashers again.
They really did. Yeah.
And I thank them for it. So thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next week.